And we are live, StrongIsland.com. Welcome to Strong Island Scene.
The May edition, 2012 of May, for those of you watching this 75 years from now on some form of who knows what embedded into your forehead.
Like rocks. You're going to listen to it on rocks.
Exactly. No, I think there's going to be some form of chip that will be inserted in people's foreheads. Are you okay over there?
Yeah, we got a little.
Did you have a little psychotic frog in your phone?
I don't know what that was. A little crispiness.
A little glitch.
A little crackle.
But yeah, I mean, the reality is, with technology being what it is, people will probably be watching this possibly 100 years from now.
You never know.
I'll be making my 75th comeback by then.
When the world ends and then it restarts and they find all these digital files of Strong Island Scene, they're going to be able to get a current,
Well, I don't think the world will end. I just think that there'll be so much information getting categorized and cataloged, and we just have to stay viable. So, I'll be reissuing my Max's album again, probably then for the 16th time, or 17th time. But how are you, Mr. Serra?
I'm very good, Mr. Lumia.
What's the news at Strong Island? Anything that we should know about before we begin to analyze pop culture for the past month?
Well, we did have our 10-year anniversary party. We had a little gathering at Shakers in Mineola.
Wow, I missed it. I was indisposed.
Yeah, we had a couple artists perform, and we had a little party, and everything was really nice. So
excellent.
We had a good time.
Excellent.
That was on the 21st, which was last 2 Saturdays ago, I guess.
You had a good turnout?
We had a pretty good turnout, yeah. I can't complain. It would have been nice to get a little more support from some of the, the crew. But, a lot of guys are busy. They're doing gigs and stuff like that. So, we had a good amount of people there. It would have been nice if a few more.
When the next 10-year thing comes along, I was having my toenails bronzed that night, so unfortunately I just was not able to make it. But
the 20-year anniversary.
The 20-year anniversary, I will definitely be there.
You'll be like Madonna doing cartwheels.
Exactly, exactly. With super poly grip holding my dentures in at that point, I think. But
no. That'll be like the 50th anniversary.
Oh, okay. All right. You're being very generous. So let's start talking about the events of the past 30 or some odd days. One of the biggest events was the death of Dick Clark, who really is responsible for everything that we're all about, which is pop culture, pop records, teen culture. He stepped into... How familiar are you with the whole Dick Clark story?
I don't know every detail.
You used to watch Bandstand during...
Yeah, when I was younger, I did see
What
that.
phase was that? That was like
man,
the 80s?
I couldn't even tell you.
Was he the host still? Because there was a point where he stepped out as the host, and some guy stepped in. I don't know who it was.
I don't remember. I'll be honest with you.
You don't know if it was really Dick Clark?
Yeah, I don't
Clark,
remember.
Maybe it was Clark Dick. His standard. And now it's Clark Dick. But there was some...
It was Dick Clark.
Oh, it was, okay. Because in the final phase of Bandstand, they were he was on to other things like $25 million pyramid, $25,000 pyramid rather, and these award shows and game shows he was doing. And of course, at that point, it was up against Soul Train, so it was kind of like a losing battle. But really, Dick Clark engineered teen culture as we know it, leading right up to and including MTV and pop stars and everything that this show is all about and that we talk about and what everybody lives for when they turn on the radio or go hunting on iTunes. And basically, he was a businessman. He was a good businessman because he believed in making money for everything that he did, something that we all still need to learn. Many of us still all need to learn. It's easier said than done. But he really was responsible for integration of black artists into white living rooms in the late 1950s when it was definitely a dangerous thing to do. He'd have a black couple dancing on American Bandstand in the midst of all white couples. And this was really, back then, a dangerous thing to do. There were still some people that are not happy about this sort of thing, but especially back then, he went out of his way to be an advocate for integration and to be an advocate for doors opening and what have you. And the other interesting thing about him is he was also very, shall we say, predatory in certain ways, which happens in the music business, as we all find out, in that, and I'm not knocking him, but this is just a reality, when records came out at that time on 45s, which was the going thing, he would let people know that their record would get played on American Bandstand if he got a songwriting credit.
Dick Clark.
On records like, if you look at the Hop, or Rock and Roll Is Here to Stay by Danny and the Juniors, or many of the big hits of the late 1950s, going into the early 1960s, he brought Chubby Checker along and The Twist. That was all introduced on Bandstand. He started his own publishing company. He started his own record pressing company, and he made sure that all these different elements played off of each other to make tons and tons and tons of money for him. There's interviews with some of the artists online now where they talk about they had this take it or leave it deal. If you want their record played on Bandstand, give them a cut of publishing. And for those of you who don't know what publishing is, it means that you own the fate of that particular song. Whenever it's played on the radio, the publisher collects the money. Whenever it's used in a film or a TV show or whatever the case may be, the publisher collects the money and then dispenses it to the people who wrote the song or whatever the, you know.
Well, that's not actually the case anymore because now ASCAP pays the publishers and the writers separately.
In every situation? Is that the deal now?
From what I'm aware of.
Yeah, well, see, that's how the industry controls everybody because they keep changing rules and they have all these intricate details.
Well, it must have been, imagine all the people getting screwed because the publishers weren't paying all the writers, so they must at one time made a change because that's the way I always remember it was, but I'm not sure.
A lot of the artists were just happy to get a career.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the way it was presented to them, that you can keep touring forever and ever on the strength of having this hit record. So don't worry about the songwriting. And a lot of the artists back then didn't write the songs anyway. A lot of the songs were written by people that were called the Brill Building, people like Carole King and I can't think of the names right now. I'm getting complete.
But
brain
I
freeze.
have heard stories about that. People getting
they're not stories. They're true.
Credit. Well, I'm not
they're
saying
true.
they were fake
and,
stories. They're stories.
Exactly. And I think he was a primary engineer of that many people looked up to him as kind of the architect. He was like the original gangsta, big time in terms of take it or leave it. Payola, he was involved in a bit of a payola scandal back then in terms of being paid to play a record on the radio. And some people, again, who don't understand the structure of how things worked back then, was that the airwaves were supposed to belong to the people, because people would say now, in an anything goes era, what's the big deal if you're getting paid to play a record on the radio? Well, the big deal then was the legitimacy of hit radio was that they were playing records that were hits, meaning that people were going out and buying them, they were requesting them, that it was a legitimate, almost a voting situation of how a record became popular. And so if you take money, it's like rigging an election. If you take money and say, this is a hit record, when it's really not, but because this guy who's runs the label or is the publicity guy handed you an envelope full of cash, then that is an illegitimate use of the airwaves, which were controlled by the FCC. I imagine if you came on the air and said, this guy just handed me $6,000, so I'm going to play this record, then maybe, I don't even know if that would be illegal at that point because there's full disclosure. But obviously nobody came on the air because most people's expectation, even now when they turn on Z100 or a hit radio station, is that they are hearing hits. People love consensus. They want to go see the number one movie that everybody else has gone to see. If they hear this TV show is the number one show, they haven't seen it. It's the nature of human curiosity and the herding instinct to be part of the herd. And so when you turn on Z100 or WBLI or any hit radio station, the assumption is you are hearing the biggest hits of the moment that everybody's reacting to.
Yeah.
But the reality is that, at various times, the forces of nature have been tampered with in the form of Big Green, the Big Green machine. And none of this is to take away from all the accomplishments of Dick Clark and how he really made pop music such an integral part of American culture.
Well, that was the practice back in the day. That a lot of people did shit like that, and those entertainers, those performers, the black performers, man, they were in.
It wasn't just black performers.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, as far as being accepted and putting in segregated hotels, and they could entertain all these white people, but when it's time for them to stay in the hotel, they had to stay in a special section.
Well, if you saw,
it's just a lot of people don't realize what they went through. They were huge stars, and they were entertaining all
but
these
come in
people,
through the back door,
and they were treated like garbage as soon as they walked off the stage. So it's sad. Before we go on, I just want to shout out Gus. He's in the chat room, and he loves your Max's shirt.
Hey, Gus, thank you so much.
And
Gus is a writer, by the way, for Punk Globe magazine.
He would also like you to do an a cappella version of Back in the Street right now.
I would love to do an a cappella version of Back in the Street, Gus, but in all honesty, I don't think I remember all the words to Back in the Street. Back in the Street, for those of you who don't know, is on the Strong Island Rocks release, Jimmy La Lumia and the Psychotic Frogs live at Max's Kansas City 2.0, which is remastered, re-edited, and includes a couple of songs that had never been released before, and Back in the Street is one of them, which is getting some really good response. I've seen some advanced reviews from publications in the UK, and people are singling out that song. And as I explained to Gus, I was being very exploitive at the time when Death to Disco came out, and my use of language in Death to Disco, my use of, is this a family show? Are we being rated if I say the word fuck?
No, we're like PG-17.
Oh, then then I suppose I will use the word fuck, because starting with the Death to Disco record, in 1978, it was very uncommon for street language to be used. Hardcore punk had not really come along yet. That came out of LA in the very late 70s, the early 80s, with groups like Black Flag and the Dead Kennedys and what have you. But at the time that the Psychotic Frogs, we were putting our records out, with the exception of Fuck Off by Wayne County, who is now Jane, the use of language on records, people were saying, you're insane, this subject matter is crazy, people will never buy records that are loaded with obscenities, don't do it, don't do it. But I loved pushing those boundaries, and so we wrote a lot of songs that were more traditional rock and roll songs that do show up on the Live at Max's album, Persecution, Leave Me Alone, a song called Loser, which is really the standout for me that I'd forgotten about, and Back in the Street, which maybe next time, Gus, if I can remember it all, and you may actually be seeing a live performance of that with a new version of Psychotic Frogs sooner than you think. The Max's Kansas City shirt, by the way, not to completely veer off from the Dick Clark conversation, reminds me that in June at Bowery Electric, all the way downtown Manhattan, is the Max's Kansas City reunion alumni show, which will be June 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. Mr. Peter Crowley, the booker at Max's during punk, who booked the Psychotic Frogs and managed Jane County during that whole period of time, has Jane performing there. The Sick Fucks, there's that word again. Ruby and the Rednecks are playing. I wish I had the whole list in front of me, because I'm going to wind up sliding people. The Waldos are playing with Walter Lure from the Heartbreakers. Tons and tons of great people. Angie Bowie, an old friend of mine, Mrs. David Bowie the first, is going to be there, I believe, on the first night now, hawking her book, Lipstick Legends, which Gus has just written a great review of in the new issue of Punk Globe. And it's all coming together, so for all the old school fans of Max's Kansas City and the early days of punk in New York, where it really started, not in the UK, you will probably want to join us at least one of the nights, if not all of the nights, at the Max's reunion. And we're going to get into one of Jane County's spawns in a few moments, who just did very, very well on a TV show. But getting back to the Dick Clark conversation, because as you see, I can maintain more than one thought in my head at the time. If you saw the Temptations movie on VH1, they actually showed when the Temptations were played down south, there would be a rope or some kind of a dividing line in the middle of the theater, and whites would sit on one side of the theater, blacks would sit on the other. They'd be allowed in together. They would pay the same price for tickets. They would not be allowed to sit amongst each other. There was a line drawn. And so breakthroughs, rock and roll was that breakthrough. Rock and roll was that breakthrough. And artists like Chuck Berry and Little Richard, who Dick Clark did provide exposure to, and then the Motown artists helped make that breakthrough happen. So we have to give all due respect to Dick Clark for all the various things that he did. And right up until the end, the show must go on. He had suffered a stroke doing his New Year's Rockin' Eve, which also became a big tradition in America for decades. Right up till the end, right up until last year, stroke or not, he was right on there hosting, co-hosting with Ryan Seacrest from American Idol, who he kind of designated to be the next Dick Clark for the next generation, which obviously will be the case this New Year's and what have you. And Seacrest has done all his testimonials as to what a big influence Dick Clark was on his career. And Seacrest is very, 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 very successful. He just re-upped for a new 2-year contract with American Idol, which I think is worth $20 or $30 million. He just re-upped with E! Entertainment, where he produces shows like The Kardashians and all of this sort of thing, for I think $40 or $50 million a year. He's signed a deal with NBC to be a correspondent for them. He's going to be at the Olympics. He's going to be doing special guest spots on the Today Show, which is probably worth $50 to $60 million. He's got his syndicated radio show on Clear Channel. So the guy is making mucho bucks. Mucho bucks. You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars right there from what I just described. Carrying on a fine tradition of Dick Clark, who made a lot of people happy, made a lot of kids happy, and made himself happy by generating a tremendous amount of money. R.I.P. Dick Clark. We wouldn't know what to do without you. We'd still probably be listening to Lawrence Welk and Pat Boone and Gus, yes, Perry Como. Perry Como is a secret, well, not a big secret favorite of young Gus. But anyway, enough with Dick Clark. Let's offer congratulations to Sharon Needles. Do you know who Sharon Needles is?
No.
RuPaul, you know who RuPaul is.
I know who RuPaul is.
RuPaul recorded for what label in the 90s with Supermodel? A hip-hop label, no doubt.
I don't remember.
RuPaul was on Tommy Boy Records.
Oh, shit.
Right alongside Naughty by Nature and Queen Latifah and all the various artists that were K7, all the people that were on Tommy Boy. Supermodel, You Better Work, was a hit record on Tommy Boy. And RuPaul is one of those entrepreneurs and survivors. And RuPaul on Logo, which is the primarily gay, lesbian, transgender, bi, whatever TV station on cable, has RuPaul's Drag Race, which is very successful enough that they run the episodes after they're on Logo. They run them on VH1, which brings us one step closer to it being on MTV, since it's all under that same banner. And this season, in addition to the usual Cher impersonators and what have you, someone named Sharon Needles came on board, who was more Marilyn Manson than Marilyn Monroe, and was a very threatening rock and roll type of persona. And in an episode that showed their audition tapes, Sharon caught my attention when he said, "I'm into the punk rock, and I don't mean the Pat Benatar punk rock. I'm talking about the Wayne Jane County punk rock," which is like a major shout out, as you're well aware of. Jane County having done Man, I Feel Like a Woman dance version here a number of years back. And as it turns out, Sharon Needles won RuPaul's Drag Race in the episode that aired last week and got $100,000 and a national tour sponsored by Absolute. And in an interview that just appeared today, Sharon again paid homage to Jane County as her punk rock idol, and that they're doing a photo session together. So all these things seem to come full circle at some point, where people get acknowledged for the things they do. And we congratulate Sharon Needles. We're very happy to see a new phase of an old art form, not to knock any of the other people that were on there, but having spun for many years in nightclubs where a lot of these type of entertainers performed, it's time for some of us, it's been time for some of us to move on from lip syncing to Barbra Streisand records, or for that matter, to Britney Spears records. A lot of the entertainers that I enjoyed, that I supported, were original people like Jane County, like Divine, people who were doing songs, original songs in their own voice and having success and touring those songs, not coming out in their mom's high heels and impersonating Shirley Bassey or Diana Ross or what have you. I mean, that
more artistic, like true artists.
They're true artists. They are being Divine. They are being
Gotcha.
Jane County. They are being RuPaul. RuPaul probably related to this person, because even though RuPaul probably did a lot of those impersonations starting out in the clubs, RuPaul came to prominence with Supermodel, which was a RuPaul song, and touring doing RuPaul material. So obviously this Sharon Needles character probably hit a nerve. So we congratulate Sharon, and we're so proud that you were able to show your roots, so to speak, by giving Jane County the recognition that she deserves for being such a big influence through the decades. So that's who Sharon Needles is.
All right.
Sharon, you should come to the Max's show on June 7th. Come up on stage and introduce Jane, who's performing that night. That might be quite interesting. But in terms of roots and things changing, something that I know Bobby LaSerra is most likely familiar with is the classic R&B station in New York called Kiss FM. Yes?
Absolutely. And I would just like to say that when I was first starting out, getting into music and DJing, I was like maybe 13 years old when I first started, and I used to literally, there's 3 stations that I used to continuously scan. I used to come home from school, put on the radio, and go from 92.3, the original KTU, to 98.7 KISS, to 107.5 BLS.
BLS,
and I would literally just go back and forth between the 3, and every time I heard a song I would like, I would write it down, and I'd run to the record store, once a week and pick up my records. That station that is me.
So you
98.7 KISS and the original 92.3 KTU, that is
Disco
my
92.
Roots. That's my roots, those 2 stations
Disco
right there.
92 with Paco.
I'm into rock too, but like as far as that era in my life, 13, 14, getting into DJing, that was major for me.
See, and I was busy destroying disco at that moment in time, but
very ironic.
It is very ironic. And one of those forthcoming reviews that I saw that's coming out in the UK, which I'm not allowed to talk about yet, actually talks about the irony of, after the dissolution of the Psychotic Frogs, the irony of La Lumia dabbling in the dance tracks, which...
So while you were destroying disco, I know what you're going to say, not literally destroying it, but...
Well, literally, yes. Literally, yes. There's a book that came out last year called Disco, which actually lays it right at my door, that said that the movement that I started reached a lot more people than the actual record ever did, which is actually true, because the record was on Death Records, an independent little label. We sold 10,000 copies right out of the box, which in 1978, for a record that couldn't get airplay because of the language, was considered quite good. And then Death just stopped making that particular record. But the Death to Disco button, which is featured on the cover of this new Max's album, was everywhere. I'll never forget seeing the early MTV guys wearing that button and then a button that I came out with afterward called Death to Adult Contemporary, which I then went after as much as I went after disco, which was all the Wimp-A-Rama stuff like Barry Manilow and Olivia Newton-John that followed on Top 40 Radio when Top 40 Radio was refusing to play the Ramones and the B-52s. They would do anything except play the scene that I was part of, which is why Death to Disco came around. Not so much that I hated disco. I hated radio. And the opening lines of the song was, once upon a time, the AM radio was a joy. Rock and roll was hailed as our brand new electric toy. Then something happened I really can't explain, but our music vanished, and in its place was lame disco. Disco sucks, which was just an angry outburst at how radio refused to play Blondie until they went disco. They refused to play the Ramones. They refused to play the New York Dolls when they were new. Because they were trying to steer everything to an older demographic. They wanted loud guitars and rock-sounding things to go away, and Olivia Newton-John and Barry Manilow and Air Supply, which they succeeded for a while until MTV came along. But my original intention was not so much to destroy to destroy disco as it was to have a platform to say, look what happened to rock and roll. Radio, as we both know, as much as people say radio's done now because of technology, radio still decides. Radio still decides. Back in the 70s, if you were not on radio, be it Top 40 radio, if you were a pop artist or a dance artist, or if you were a rock artist, if you were not on the hip FM station, you did not exist. There was no MTV yet. There was no internet yet. There was nothing except rock magazines and radio. And if radio decided they were not going to support you or a scene that you happen to be part of, you were done. You had no recourse. My recourse was Death to Disco, which made a loud noise and which many people still resent me for. Many people still resent me for. Hi, Larry Flick. I love you anyway. Who was the editor of the
Billboard.
disco, Billboard. And I found out in several circumstances, and I can understand where he's coming from, and the irony of me moving. But during that whole period of time, I loved Motown. I loved dance records. I loved black music. People were saying Death to Disco is racist, which was ridiculous because I was bringing black records to school in the late 60s and early 70s and being called every name in the book in a traditionally white neighborhood. And as far as Death to Disco being a homophobic statement, which I also heard, hello, are you kidding me? I'm making a homophobic record. Yeah, right away. But these are the things that I heard. These are the things that were thrown at me, and this all goes back to, I guess, the BLS conversation, because BLS and KISS FM. I brought up KISS, and we go off on these tangents. Yeah. But for those who don't know, KISS FM has been removed from the airwaves in New York to make room for an FM version of ESPN Radio, sports radio, to compete with WFAN, which is an AM sports station. And as a result, BLS, which is an old school R&B station in New York, and KISS have merged into one on the BLS location on the dial, which is 107?
107.5.
Still there, okay. So they had to get rid of a bunch of the DJs and shows. They had to get rid of one of the music directors and just combine into like Custer's Last Stand, because times change and the world keeps moving on. And they provided a particular service at that time for people of color and people who were Caucasian but enjoyed music from people of color, as young Bobby used to run home from school to turn on the radio every day. And with the advent of the internet, and when whatever the case may be, their ratings took a nosedive. They're hoping that by combining the decent audience for KISS and the decent audience for BLS and putting them together in one spot, that it may help the ratings situation.
It's all about money. It's all about money. They need to survive. They need to pay their bills. And if they're not bringing in...
And also what came along, hip-hop came along. So you have Hot 97 and Power 105, which drew some of the audience that used to listen to Kiss, which would play hip-hop, but not exclusively. And then you had a station that played exclusively hip-hop, and people that just didn't want to hear anything but hip-hop, with some R&B thrown in there, of course. There is some R&B thrown in there. They fled from those stations, went over to Hot 97, and then Power jumped up to compete with them. So it was a kind of, the market was chopped up into too many pieces for everybody to be successful. But it is a legendary New York station. It was number one in New York, as WBLS was number one in New York at one period of time. And
that had to be a long time ago, though, right?
It was, I guess it was in the 80s. It was in the 80s, yeah, absolutely. Because KTU disappeared once disco sucked. KTU, by, I think, the early 80s was gone. And at that point, hip-hop, which had started out as a novelty with things like Rapper's Delight in 78 or 79 and Grandmaster Flash with White Lines and all that, it all coalesced, and you had Luther Vandross and a lot of the really smooth R&B people coming along. And in the 80s, those were very powerful stations. They were very, very powerful stations, ratings-wise. And then things move along. It's very rare to hold on to the crown for a long time. I think the only station that really is holding on after all this time, after a few ups and downs, is Z100.
Because they're a commercial radio station. They're playing the...
Well, BLS and KISS were commercial radio stations as well.
Yeah, but no, but they were
anybody
still,
with advertising.
They were still orientated towards a R&B dance, soulful, Z100, PLJ, to me, is the best, the most popular music
they're hit
of
radio.
all genres.
They're hit radio.
Exactly.
Right.
So if you're going to have a hit radio station, number one, that's your best genre to go for.
And the one time that Z100 faltered in the 90s is when they jumped on the grunge wagon and they actually became an alternative top 40 station, meaning, and a lot of people forget this, but they took a nosedive in the ratings. It was nothing but Pearl Jam, Sponge, Nirvana, Jane's Addiction, everything coming out of the Seattle.
They tried to capitalize on
Alice in Chains. Yeah, they made that the top 40 in New York, and they throw in the Real McCoy here or La Bouche there, just to have some semblance of top 40, and people just were not having it. And well, of course, what came along at the end of the 90s was Spice Girls, Hanson, Backstreet Boys, Britney, NSYNC, Christina, and bingo. Top 40 was back. Z100 went back to being pure top 40, playing all the hits, and went right back to number one, where it started, I guess, in 82 or 83 that Z came on the air. I was up there the first week, was great friends with Scott Shannon. And they've held on. They're still right up there in the top two, top three. Yeah. But specialized stations like a KISS or like BLS, and even when Z tried to go the specialized route, they really put their neck on the line. They were in trouble there when they specialized in just the one genre, the alternative thing, and they got out of there real quick. So that's that deal. So goodbye, KISS FM. Those of you who enjoy that kind of thing, head on over to, what is the number on the dial?
StrongIsland.com.
No, that too as well, but if you're in your car and you don't have a computer in your car.
107.5.
Yeah, BLS is still alive, and I don't know if they're calling it BL KISS or KISS LS or Kiss My Ass. Or
BLS, from what I could be not correct, but I was told when I was younger, BLS stood for Black Liberation Station. Is that true? Like from its roots, when it first came out.
I couldn't tell you that. I imagine if I were going to get created, I could come up with a whole bunch of things that it stands for, but we're not going to go there out of respect to everything that has happened to the station. So we'll just leave well enough alone.
Let's not.
We'll just leave well enough alone. Speaking of stations, and because don't you love how I always tie all of this material together into a quilt somehow? And speaking of the transition for me from punk to when I came to Strong Island with young Serra over here and started doing dance records, some of those records did tremendously well on radio, internet, and terrestrial overseas. And today when I turned on Facebook, Tempo FM in Belgium with the Party Zone and our good pal Zimi. Hey, Zimi, we love you. Still getting requests for Last Call, which was the third of the dance singles we did, which is a DJ lament. We had for DJs only, Sorry No Requests, which are all, propulsive beats and music that was provided by Barbie, and the lyric content and the performance of, the DJ lamenting by yours truly. And those records all did well, and it just blew my mind today to see a conversation for Last Call, the Vomit in the Car remix, which those of you who know the song will know what it's all about. And those of you who don't know the song, head over to Tempo FM, Belgium, for Party Zone with Zimi, or actually you can go to YouTube and search Last Call, because there is a handmade version that I made with my BlackBerry up there right now of Last Call. You can check it out. But the records are still happening, and as a result, we're going to have a little revival of the La's experiment, La Lumia and La Serra.
Coincidentally, we just so happen to have been reworking the original one that started off this whole string of little hits that we had. Was the original for DJs only.
Exactly.
Which was on the flip side of the anthem, which was another big...
the drugs.
Which actually
record.
You were wearing that shirt
a couple of shows back.
Last month.
A couple of shows back. Yeah. Or maybe it was
But
this.
yeah, we have, just so let everybody know, we be on the lookout, because next month will be available in iTunes the first of those singles, which was for DJs only, and we're re-releasing it with 2 new versions of that. One, a new version from me, one, a new version from our man Jason Culture Lipsy from Matter Productions, and also the original is going to be on there. So you're going to be able to get this whole single again revitalized, and anybody who's never heard it before, they're going to love it, because they're going to have 3 brand new versions that they've never heard. So I'm excited about that.
You did a great job, too, the new remix that I heard. I'm really looking forward for it to get out there. Basically, for those who don't know, it's the guy in the DJ booth. Between the 3 records, starting with for DJs only, it's all the stuff that a DJ hears in the course of a night, and on the record, the DJ gets to respond. And actually, in all my years of DJing, I actually used a lot of the lines that appear on the record.
Yeah.
For example, the most popular one on For DJs Only, someone coming up, which they always do back then, while, you've got a dance floor going and people hopping around, and that particular person doesn't like what you're playing, the guy will come up and say, "You got anything with a beat?" And I got on the mic one night and said, "Everything has a beat, asshole." And that wound up on the record, along with a lot of other questions and responses.
It's
and
funny.
DJs worldwide just went nuts.
Because
over
when
this
they
record.
heard it, the things that you were saying, they've heard those same things so many times.
It resonated.
So they laugh.
Yeah.
They love to play the record because it's a little shot at those people. They can play something and kind of like get a little dig at some of the people.
And it lets those people realize how stupid they sound when they say, "Are you going to play anything good soon?"
It could prevent further, it may educate the general public on what not to say.
I doubt it, because when someone's drunk, they're going to come up and say, "I know that stupid fucking record you made, but play something good anyway, because this shit sucks."
I
mean, it was only about 2 months ago, before the hiatus that I am currently taking from DJing. After a series of certain different things, I've got many other projects going on. But I literally had someone come up to me and say, "Can you please play such and such? Because nobody's dancing anyway." Which, number one, was not true. And number two, is an exact word-for-word line from the 2003 For DJs Only record. I mean, I actually thought, did you listen to the record and rehearse and then come in and deliver the line? Because she delivered it flawlessly. She was drunk off her ass. "Are you going to play something good soon? Because nobody, boy."
I like to look at it. You describe it as at the end of For DJs Only as a public service.
As a public service announcement.
I like that.
But it was more an announcement for DJs, because we heard from some of the biggest DJs around the world who were playing it. the guys who did Dive in the Pool, and Susan Morabito had made it one of her top choices. DJ Boris was playing. I mean, you could run right down the list. DJ Dennis the Menace was playing it on the radio at the time. Local guys, international guys. And, of course, getting back to how we started, our good friends overseas, including Tempo FM in Belgium and Zimi. So, Zimi, I thank you for keeping the flame glowing during the whole period of time when we kind of just went to sleep on everything and it was just kind of statements made at that period of time. And it's wonderful to keep getting response after all this time from all these records that we put out there. And ultimately, all of them will see the light of day, as Bobby said, on iTunes. And I would imagine probably Amazon as well, right? Because it's all part of that distribution deal that Strong Island now has. So you'll be able to get downloads on iTunes and Amazon. And because I've seen some attempted rip-offs of Sorry No Requests and things like that that are just god-awful on YouTube that came out maybe in the past year or two, where they've actually taken the same song title, which we can't do anything about. You can't own a song title. The only thing you can't do, see all this education we're giving to these young songwriters, you can't take a song and call it CBGB, because the CBGB people will come and get you. You can't take a song title called Kodachrome, like Paul Simon did, because they will sue your ass off, which Kodachrome did with Paul Simon. They now own that song. Because you can talk about it in the lyrics, but if you put it as the name of your product, you're screwed. Which is why when we did New York City's song, which was the last Psychotic Frogs record, What's That Spell, CBGB, and I was dancing around with calling it CBGB or the CBGB song, and did my homework and found out that, yes, in the lyrics it's fine, but if I called the song CBGB, whoever has the trademark would be up my butt in a second if the record started happening. And we've got close to 70,000 views for New York City song on YouTube as of right now, as New York City song. So they would probably, if nothing else, be looking, so you're getting all this education, kids. Learn so you don't make painful mistakes that come to haunt you. Anyway, Christina Aguilera is on our list. I think she came up in the conversation about the teen explosion that brought Z100 back when we talked about Z going back to top 40 and staying up top. And young, delightful Christina was part of that explosion, the pop explosion with Britney and NSYNC and Justin. Well, Christina has had her ups and downs. Right now, she's up again thanks to her hosting the celebrity, the star host on The Voice TV show, alongside Adam Levine, CeeLo, and Blake Shelton. But she has developed a very kind of Joan Crawford, Diana Ross diva thing going on. The guys from The Wanted, who are enjoying a big hit right now called Glad You Came, are online talking about what a nightmare, what a bitch, and other names that I'm not even going to repeat she is. When they met her, she snubbed them, she looked the other way, she made a face, they spoke to her and she wouldn't respond. Just this whole diva-esque thing going on. And then you told me the Justin Bieber story, right? About
well, he went over to he went over and gave everybody a hug, and he went over to her, and I guess he went to just give her a kiss on the cheek, and she kind of like
she backed off.
She totally
she was like, take a hike, Junior.
And it's weird too, because she almost like, after he started walking away, she still had her head turned, and she was almost like she was disgusted or something like that. Very, very weird.
She's, artists, I have to say, being an artist and being a big weirdo, artists can be very big weirdos and can be very competitive and be very drama-driven and be very emotional. But when you're trying to make a comeback, as Patti LaBelle said a few years ago, and I guess it's a famous slogan, God don't like ugly. And Christina has been real ugly on The Voice with Tony Luca, who's a former Mouseketeer who came on and made his way through and didn't select her as his coach. And she didn't even recognize him at first. She didn't even know who he was when he came up there. And I think after he competed that first episode on the laptop or whatever that they probably have in front of them with the cues from the producers, by the way, young lady, that guy was on Mickey Mouse Club with you. And the whole audience watching TV right now, the millions of people watching, know that. And they probably think that you're a real dumb bitch because you don't know it. So she acted surprised and she went running backstage.
She ran back.
She ran backstage. But when he was up there, she had no idea. When they announced his name, she had no idea. Mm-hmm. And then the camera showed her like a light bulb had gone off. Now, I don't think that a light bulb went off. I think that her laptop or whatever they have telling the judges how to act and what to do, because nothing's spontaneous in television, including reality TV. They said, by the way, Christina, people are probably wondering why you don't recognize your former, she went running back there. But Adam Levine took him on. He chose Adam, maybe after realizing that she doesn't remember who I am, which she's been through a lot in her life, and she's had her bouts with things, and she's met millions of people. And he didn't do anything after Mickey Mouse Club, so maybe she can be excused for not remembering. No. I meet people that I haven't seen in a million years that have stories about when I worked at a record store, when I was in the punk band, when the dance records came out, when I was DJing in this club, and I don't remember them, and I'm not being a diva about it. There's too much information in your head. But she's had the long knives out for Tony Lucca every week. She insinuated that there's a bromance with him and Adam Levine, and that he's riding on her coattails from the Mouseketeer days and all these things. Last week, she counseled Adam to say, you really should look at the girl and not him to be your finalist. And she's really going out of her way to try and hurt this guy. And I think in so doing, she's actually helping him. Justin Timberlake, who was also on the Mickey Mouse Club with them, rose to the occasion. He's on Twitter telling everybody, support Tony Lucca. So it's now turning into a battle. All that's missing is Britney, who probably doesn't even know that show is on. Who knows what rehab she's in right now. But it would be very interesting because Christina said that Britney had a crush on Tony Lucca, who's older than them. Uh-huh. And they were both young girls. And maybe she was jealous, or maybe she's just jealous that he's getting all this attention for having been.
How could you're Christina Aguilera? How are you going to get jealous over some up and coming? I mean, she was with him as a kid.
How can you be jealous about an up and coming? I have two words for you. One of my favorite performers, Diana Ross. I'll never forget the story. It was in the book Randy Tower Borelli wrote. Natalie Cole, when she was coming up in the 70s, Nat King Cole's daughter, she had her first hit record out. She kind of idolized Ross, but also was trying to cut ground as the 70s version of Ross, which was, she went backstage at a Ross show and actually sat down. They had a piano there, and everybody's hanging around, and Natalie's just tinkling away on the piano and just starts singing a little tune, because it's like a party atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And Ross looks directly into her mirror at her people and says, through gritted teeth, "Get that woman out of here now," because it's Ross's moment.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's Ross's moment.
Yeah,
and the voice is Christina's moment, and now all of a sudden this guy.
All right, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think the voice is Christina's moment.
She thinks it is.
Well, this is a show.
They're paying her more than Levine or CeeLo or Blake Shelton. They're paying her a lot more.
The whole concept of the show is to bring out a voice, regardless of where that voice comes from, what that voice looks like. And she's contradicting
as far as she's
her
concerned,
whole show. If she's contradicting everything that the show is about.
Well, she doesn't care about that. Oh. As far as she's concerned,
I think she needs a good.
Well, go do it. We could use the publicity.
I would love to. Can you hook it up?
As far as she's concerned, and it's probably true, she's the bait that drew people to that show in the beginning. Because in the beginning, Adam Levine and Maroon 5 were out on the street. They were down on their luck. They were not happening. Moves like Jagger and all that came about because of the voice. After the fact, the last few Maroon 5 records was stiffing out. CeeLo had his one hit, Fuck You or Forget You, and Blake Shelton was a country guy. Christina was the magnet. There's no doubt about it. NBC was paying her double weekly what it was paying everybody else. She was the biggest name of the names on there. And whenever they ask her, the rock girl that was on did It's a Man's World by James Brown the other night. Now, I knew right away, because I saw Christina do a dynamite version of that on the Grammys about 10 or 15 years ago when she was, back when you were still young, Christina, you know, back when you were still a young performer. Now you're kind of moving into the middle age area. But she did an astounding version. So when it's time for her to judge this rock girl doing the James Brown song, all she could talk about was, I did that song. I know where those notes come from. I know how hard it is to get those notes. I, me. And I'm someone who's guilty of that at times, as you know. You notice how quiet he is right now. But the bottom line is, whatever, the subject always has to come back to her. She had her opera guy on, and she's comparing herself. There was one of the other judges' guys was on and did this whole run, and she said, I know how hard it is to do that. And then she sits there and does the run. Mm-hmm. So she's making everything about herself. She just, and that is showbiz, people. That is Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard. It makes you crazy. And you see everybody as a threat. You see everybody as competition. And I got news for you. In this business, I hate to say it, but if you don't see everybody as a threat and you don't see everybody as competition, you're going to get squashed by somebody who does look at things that way, because that's the way this business has worked, going back to the ancient theater in Colosseum in ancient Rome, right through vaudeville, right through Broadway, right up to the present moment in time, right through East Coast, West Coast beefs, and through the whole history of entertainment. If you do not have that killer instinct, can we say Madonna? If you don't have that killer instinct, it's eat or be eaten, and you will be eaten.
Well, I agree. I just think she should be worried about other female artists, not a guy from the Mickey Mouse Club. You know what I'm saying? I think he's
not just a guy from the Mickey Mouse Club anymore. He is now one of the four finalists, and she has been actively resisting him and trying to get him.
She's making it worse for herself, because the more she does this, if he blows up, then anything that could involve her with him in the future, he's not going to want to do it with her.
He's online today saying he's confused. He's saying he's confused. He doesn't get it. Maybe he did something in the past. He doesn't. He's talking about, and that's going to get sympathy for him from people.
Yeah,
because he's saying, I don't know what I did. Maybe something happened back then, and it's deep rooted with her, and I'm confused. I don't understand it. Mm-hmm. That's only going to draw sympathy for him and make her look like the evil queen in a Walt Disney.
People are going to keep seeing her acting like that, and it's just going to make it worse for her and better for him.
Right.
So she's not doing the right thing.
Right. I still think Britney should show up with a pie and hit her in the face with a pie and side with him as well and reunite with him, and who knows. I don't know. But that's the deal with TV. And in related TV news, because all of these shows are so popular, there's a show coming up called Duets on ABC in a few weeks, which is going to be another contest show, but it's going to have to do with duets between pop stars. And among them was Kelly Clarkson, and I think a country guy, and another female, I can't remember who else, and Lionel Richie was scheduled and was in the advertisements. And to show you how show business is, we talked on the last episode about how Madonna had made a big comeback representing the early 80s, and Lionel Richie made a big comeback with an album called Tuskegee. And Lionel's album has since gone to #1 on Billboard, as Madonna's album, after the Super Bowl, has spilled down. Lionel Richie, 1980s Motown star, is now king of the roost. He's #1 on the Billboard album chart right now. So what do you think Lionel did? He told Duets, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya. He pulled out. He's going on tour. He's got a #1 album. I don't know if that's always the wisest thing to do. I really think, #1, if you make that kind of commitment and it's advertised and a network's putting money behind it, you should honor that commitment. Because why? When you have an album that's not selling a year from now, that network or any network is not going to want to touch you, because of your track record of skipping out. And number two, your fans were looking forward to seeing you on this show. And television reaches a lot more record buyers than the tour that you had lined up. You could always tour after the duet show has run its season. And after the show has run its season, you're probably going to have even more tickets than before from all the people that watched you on the TV show that now want to come out and see you live. I personally think that was a very foolish move on the part of Lionel Richie. But, I mean, that's showbiz. People are bitching right now about Steven Tyler doing a Burger King commercial. Last show, we talked about Mary J. Blige getting feedback. Steven Tyler now is hawking Burger King, and the old school fans are saying he's a sellout. He has nothing to do with rock and roll anymore. How could you do this?
All right.
Thoughts?
I'd like to comment because first, when we discussed the Mary J. Blige thing, I did not see the video, and I saw the video
With the chicken. I hadn't seen it yet either.
Oh my God!
Yeah, it was very...
It is so cheesy.
Very racist. Almost racist, right?
It was just a joke. And I just questioned who was in charge of that campaign, the commercial. Where was her manager to approve this? All I know is it was the cheesiest, corniest thing I ever seen in my life, and I understand why people got upset. And now I just saw the Steven Tyler one, not as cheesy, but 75% as cheesy as Mary J. Blige's. Who is doing these commercials for Burger King? Because they are not cool, they are not hip, they are not happening.
The bottom line is it's all about money. And in the 1960s and 70s, when rock was serious, rock artists wouldn't even let their music be included on TV commercials because it meant you were a sellout. It meant you weren't cool. It wasn't cool to do that. Now, when corporations will throw tremendous amounts of money at people and everything, after the Wall Street movie came out and greed is good, greed became good, and it became all about the green. Hip-hop enhanced that because hip-hop was like, we're all about the money. They made no bones about it. Show business has always been all about the money. It just wasn't cool to say it. Now, it's become cool to say it. So Mary J., who knew what she was doing when she shot that commercial, she looked at how cheesy the commercial was. She looked at the pile of money. She looked at the commercial. She looked at the money, and guess which way she went. And Steven Tyler, the same thing. The commercial, the money, the commercial, the money. And bingo, yes, I love Burger King. I mean, welcome to the world, kids.
Unbelievable. Yo, shout out to DJ Goomba in the chat room.
How you doing, Goomba? Long time.
What's up, Goomba?
Well, we have a number of other things that we didn't get to talk about. Because, you know, once we get talking and when this mouth gets going here, and everybody's always like, let Bobby speak. Do I ever not let you speak?
Listen, I let you go because you're really the brains of this operation here. I'm just here for good looks. You know what I'm saying?
Well, also, folks, he's on every night of the week.
Not every night.
Well, numerous shows, and strongly recommend for those of you who haven't sampled the other products on Strong Island TV and Strong Island Radio that you definitely should. And you'll see the good looks all the time, whereas me, you get once a month. So in that 1 hour once a month, I got a lot of stuff on my mind. But we look forward to seeing you a month from now. We're getting ready for the big Max's show. Watch for the Max's live album. Go get it on iTunes. We'll have the dance stuff up. Go to Party Zone on Tempo FM and let them know how much you like Last Call, because that's going to be coming your way again. Bobby, any last...
I would just like to say, everybody, please check out the site, become a member, check out the schedule on the website, strongisland.com, and check out all the other shows. And definitely shop.strongisland.com. Get your apparel. We have some amazing T-shirts representing Long Island, New York, and just some really cool stuff. So please support us. Let us keep this movement going. I appreciate
Strong
it.
Island scene. We're wrapping up another one. We'll see you next month.
All right. Thank you.